There is something amiss in the air, my friends. Can you smell it? Well, so far we've been focusing on perinheri's ramifications regarding the curse of the wilderness. The other reason perinheri was interesting was that it introduced to us our second dynasty of Khaenri'ah, the Crimson Moon Dynasty. Whilst our information on the dynasty is extremely limited, we do know two key pieces of information regarding them, and a, speculative third. The first is that they predate the Eclipse Dynasty and rules during the Archon War. The second is they had a heavy focus on alchemy, as opposed to the Eclipse Dynasty's focus on mechanical engineering. And the third, and more speculative one, albeit more exciting, is that the Crimson Moon Dynasty swallowed the Eclipse Dynasty. Quotes, "Chalk pursues gold in this time inopportune. The eclipse is swallowed by the Crimson Moon." How can it be speculative if it's literally written right? I suppose I meant there's like infighting between that, whatever. The last 2 points in the grand scheme of things appear to be connected, given we know alchemy, or more specifically, the art of chemia, was one of the major reasons behind the downfall of Khaenri'ah, as said so by Dainsleif himself.
But the source of the knowledge he possesses, it once brought about the destruction of a glorious nation. It hails from Khaenri'ah, the art of chemia. Soil and chalk, the universe and earth, pure dust and the birth of human life. There is no mistaking it.
However, this presents an interesting potential problem with our current understanding of things, given Khaenri'ah itself was also the victim of abyssal attacks. Could it be then that what brought about the end of the kingdom of Khaenri'ah wasn't simply the Eclipse Dynasty dabbling in forbidden arts, losing control and being unable to fight back, but rather was a plot in part orchestrated by the remnants of the Crimson Moon Dynasty, who not only wanted revenge against the Eclipse Dynasty, but were also coincidentally focused on alchemy, the very thing that brought about the downfall of Khaenri'ah. Referencing the quotes earlier, in Chinese, it doesn't use the word swallowed, but rather the word revenge, meaning the quote can be better translated as, "The Crimson Moon took revenge against the Dark Sun." Furthermore, the entirety of the quote starts with, quotes, "The original calamity had been overturned, yet the island in the sky set the earth to burn." Now, while this doesn't, tell us much in the way of the order of event of things on the day of the cataclysm, what it does do is let us explore a possibility in light of perinheri, which is the fall of Khaenri'ah wasn't the result of solely the cataclysm, but was in actuality due to a personal vendetta settled between two dynasties that the entirety of Tibet and eventually Khaenri'ah itself had to pay for. But before we get into that, let's go back to Skirk, our good old pal Skirk. Do you remember the names she mentioned and what they were pursuing?
His name is Surtalogi. Some master isn't sufficiently famous. How should I describe him then? Have you heard of the name the Foul? Still nothing? Well, how about the Visionary? Vetterfulnir then? Or Gold Rhinedottir? But I suppose you understand now, yes? My master is likely a similar sort to Rhinedottir. They are both pursuing some form of perfection.
The names being Norse and Germanic clue us in on the fact that it's likely that in addition to Rhinedottir, both Vetterfulnir and Surtalogi also hail from Khaenri'ah. Pursuing perfection is an extremely broad way of putting things, and so far as we know, they each took their own path in trying to pursue said perfection. Rhinedottir created many living beings till she had her magnum opus in Albedo, but in the process created many beings destructive in nature, born from the abyss, such as Riftwolves and Durin. Surtalogi was doing some sort of fucking whale conservation projects, but given he's referred to as the Foul by Skirk, and the Foul Legacy, which is also abyssal in nature, translates to extreme evil arts are demon kings. What? They ain't even say those were evil arts, nigga. They said extreme evil arts. Clearly, this Surtalogi fella's a heinous nigga, bro. A menace to society, a threat. But given again, it states that extreme evil arts, I mean, he too has his own questionable path to perfection. Vetterfulnir, we know nothing about, so I don't even want to speak on this nigga. I mean, look, the only thing I can possibly come up with when it comes to Vetterfulnir is he or she could be the self-proclaimed prophet who gave Dane's intro card, given, I mean, Rhinedottir is a visionary, which is just like a cracked prophet. And they both should be from Khaenri'ah, so it would make sense that Rhinedottir, you know, knew Dane's living. Something art of poetry. This nigga got no fucking bearing on what I'm about to say. Get the fuck out of here, nigga. Too many V's in your name anyway. Throughout history, the pursuit of perfection is something that can closely be linked with alchemy, given alchemy, in its rawest form, is about transforming base metals into gold and discovering the elixir of life. Gold symbolic of reaching the pinnacle of material and spiritual perfection. But if that's the case then, and these three were in fact notable alchemists, where did they come from? If they were all alchemists and knew one another, it makes sense then that they operated during the Crimson Moon Dynasty, given it was the golden age of alchemy. I mean, hell, it's not a coincidence that the Renaissance saw all the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, look, ages that promote a way of thinking will obviously lend itself to produce more people that adopt and practice it. Also, perinheri tells us about an individual named Yord who walks with the Darksprites. The term Darksprites here is what I want to highlight. There's a note by it, and the author's comments tell us that, quotes, they are the Black Wolves of the first edition. Archaeological work on Khaenri'ah indicates that this must have been a type of war beast created using alchemy. Alchemy and the Beastmaster Knights were a mainstay during the Crimson Moon Dynasty, but interest in mechanical engineering during the Eclipse Dynasty would cause it to fall behind. It's a rough time getting through that quote. Now, it's important to mention that while the knee-jerk reaction here might be to assume that the Black Wolves mentioned are Rift Wolves, I mean, hell, the Archives refers to Rift Wolves as Black Wolves. I mean, this whole thing raises some problems. Aside from putting Rhinedottir's age in the ballpark of 3,000 years old, which, I mean, in and of itself isn't a problem as much as it is just hilarious. There's also the problem of the Rift Wolves themselves and the timeline. To the point of the Rift Wolves themselves, it's important to note that due to all of them having monstrous blood and being able to erode the world's barriers, it seems like they're just fucked in nature. During the Cataclysm, they led the charge for the Abyss, tearing down the borders for the bigger shit to come through. That was their entire purpose, and they even fought the Khaenri'ahs, who just refer to them as dark beasts. By contrast, the Black Wolves mentioned in perinheri are referred to as Darksprites and Black Wolves of the first edition. They were war beasts for Khaenri'ah, who were often controlled with a beast master. Then there's the problem of the timeline. For instance, in Breeze Amidst the Forest, it's written, quote, the Eclipse Dynasty had fallen and disaster spread across the land. The alchemist known as Gold became a sinner and gave rise to countless monsters with their uncanny powers. If this line seems to imply the Hounds were created nearer to the Cataclysm as opposed to some 3,000 years earlier, one exciting possibility to explain away the timeline problems, however, is Irminsul. Could it be someone altered Irminsul post-Cataclysm to affect how people would remember it, and part of what was changed were the Rifthounds? All of our information on Black Wolves comes from people accounts of things and records. However, we now have a fable telling us something different when it comes to Black Wolves, suggesting they might not have been as destructive in nature. We know fables are immune to Irminsul alterations. However, there's still a problem, which is we've fought against Rift Wolves and know they are closer to the official records than the fables, assuming they are the same species. We know Irminsul is powerful, but is it powerful enough to completely alter an entire species' core being to fit the narrative that was written into it? We don't know. I think the most likely answer is Rhinedottir's Black Wolves were inspired by the Black Wolves of the first edition, and she either created her own horrifically fucked version with abyssal powers, or simply altered the originals through alchemy. Just because I will admit, I do find it odd that there were two different groups of Black Wolves that were both created by alchemy, and were both used as war beasts despite being thousands of years apart. They clearly have to have some sort of connection. Well, that was a tangent to end all tangents. Good lord. Anyway, before this we were talking about the possibility that Rhinedottir and friends were with the Crimson Moon Dynasty. I do think it's weird, however, that even if the Crimson Moon did take revenge on the Eclipse Dynasty, it clearly wasn't done in an overly exposed manner, like, say, a coup attempt, given there were no reports of infighting near the time of the Cataclysm. So when the Crimson Moon Dynasty took revenge at this time inopportune, it seems like the Cataclysm was already going on, just because, again, the quote states, quote, the original calamity had been overturned, yet the island in the sky set the earth to burn. Chalk pursues gold in this time inopportune. The eclipse is swallowed by the Crimson Moon. The calamity having already been overturned, this time inopportune, and then finally the eclipse is swallowed the Crimson Moon. It sounds like the Crimson Moon lead more towards taking revenge when the kingdom was already being attacked, rather than starting the attack themselves. Cowards, you hate to see it. If this is the case then it's safe to say that the Crimson Moon had something to do with King Irmin becoming indisposed during the Cataclysm. King Irmin, for those unaware, was the final king of Khaenri'ah, a member of the Eclipse Dynasty. He may as well have been an op with the way he drove the fucking kingdom into the ground. A masterclass it was. God King Remus himself would have been impressed, I'm sure. What I mean to say is, unlucky for the people of Khaenri'ah, King Irmin was a crackhead who subscribed to the idea that enhancing machines with forbidden knowledge would be enough to take down the heavenly principles. He was wrong, and instead it just brought ruin to his kingdom, and then mysteriously, he became indisposed. We only know of this thanks to a barely legible bulletin where on it it's written, quotes, "In view of King Irmin's presence in disposed states and the current unknown threats facing the kingdom, Knight Marshal Anfordas has proclaimed he will temporarily take up the post of regent and lead the regnum consilem ortahalem until the kingdom returns to the state of normalcy." King Irmin's apparent poor health is referenced only in this document and nowhere else, and the kingdom came at a terribly convenient, because he was a crackhead. While yes, I suppose it's possible he simply could have caught Ebola, it now seems far more likely that at this time inopportune, King Irmin was swallowed whole by the Crimson Moon.